order this regular meeting of the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors. We'll have an invocation by Ms. Binder and the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Miller. Please stand as you're able.
Please, Lord, grant us the wisdom and patience to make the best decision for our King George Service Authority customers and for the county at large. Amen.
United States, to the republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Are there any amendments to the agenda, Mr. Miller?
No, sir. Excuse me, I stand. Ms. Lackey?
We have a proposed addition of a closed meeting item.
Do I have a motion to add that?
And if I may, I guess it made it onto the republished agenda. It was not on the original agenda, but I believe it was on the agenda that folks have been picking up as they've walked into the meeting. So I don't think we need a formal motion on that, but it was in addition to the agenda as originally published.
All right. Yeah, I see it's on the. I see it now. It got added to the agenda, so we're good then. Moving on, public comment. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? Seeing there are none, Mr. Dines, is there anyone online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
We will close public comment. Reports of the members of the board. Ms. Binder.
I do not really have a report, but at the VACO Board of Directors, we did talk about DEQ and water and wastewater, especially surface water. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Ms. Cleveland?
Yes, good evening. I was able to speak to a few of my constituents after our last meeting when we discussed the restructuring of the service authority. So I'm looking forward to having a discussion today and sharing some of that information that they passed on.
Mr. Morse?
Thank you. I had a meeting with Supervisor Stonehill and just gave him a briefing update of the different topics and things that have been going on with the service authority. Thank you.
And as for myself, I've been talking to different constituents and different interested parties on discussions on the water and wastewater here in the county, just to provide some light back to the board on our discussions. Moving on, we'll go to the consent agenda.
I move to accept the consent agenda as written.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. Do I have any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion carries. Report from the county attorney, Ms. Lackey.
I had mentioned a few weeks ago that there were a few proposals, might be a little bit strong word, but there was some interest in using some water tower sites for wireless antenna. So last week, Mr. Miller and I had a virtual meeting with one of those parties that was interested, and I gave some initial drafting edits to two applicants who are potentially interested in both co-locating on a water tower site. It would be a potential source of additional revenue to the service authority. So that's something that I'm not ready to bring forward just yet, but just wanted to update you on the status and that is progressing as a potential opportunity.
Mr. Chair, is that going to be sort of like what we did a long time ago with KGI and Verizon?
Right. It's similar to a few other situations that there have been in the past. In some circumstances, there's been the requirement that both the board of directors and the board of supervisors approve based on the structure of who owns the property, who operates the property. In this case, it's a water tower site that's owned exclusively by the service authority. So if we do bring those forward, it would just require a public hearing before this board.
All right. Thank you.
Moving on to presentations and reports, Walnut Hill Development Utilities Infrastructure Proposal.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board. I'm Jay Gerald with JPI Walnut Hill. We're the developers of the Walnut Hill subdivision, which is currently dormant. It's near Dahlgren, at basically at Owens and 206. I don't know whether y'all are aware, but in 2016, the board and our firm entered into a reimbursement agreement where we would agree to connect to the authority's water and sewer, and in response, we would be reimbursed the tap fees and the connection fees to reimburse us for upsizing the facilities. The project was originally planned to be 42 units, single-family dwellings. Because of the the soil conditions on the site, the development became very difficult to actually finish. There's stormwater ponds could not be properly constructed. So we had to do a redesign of the project, and we're currently in for a rezoning to change from 42 single-family residents to 25 single families and 75 townhouses. And as part of this rezoning, we need to change, if the board is willing, this board is willing to, not only the Board of Supervisors, but this board has to let us change our reimbursement agreement. And we've been talking with staff about how we could redo the agreement. And we've got for you tonight a 2-page amendment to that agreement, which would basically say that we would accommodate the 100 units instead of the 42 units, and that we would lock our reimbursement in at the 2016 amounts. So the amount that we'd be reimbursed would be about $660,000, even though it's going to cost us significantly more than that for us to do the infrastructure at this point. Much of the infrastructure has been installed. It has never been accepted by the authority, so we will have to go through those steps at the appropriate time when we're finished. We know that we'll have to work with staff to get them to sign off that they're happy with it. On the proposal that we've got in front of you, it shows where the different parts of the infrastructure are, some that have been installed, some remain to be installed, and we would not be getting reimbursement until we're finished with our work. This agreement would be contingent upon the rezoning being successful, because if the rezoning is not successful, clearly we won't have 75 or 100 lots to deal with. I would like to hand out a little calculation that we did. We worked with staff on how to come up with the reimbursement amount, and it was agreed that the best way to go was to use the estimates from 2016. Like I said, we've spent significantly more than that, but I wanted to give you a recap of the difference in today's deal, and if you approve this revision, I think it'll be significantly beneficial to both us, but also to the authority. Under today's deal, and that's shown in the box on the bottom left, the authority would, after paying us the $660,000 reimbursement, the authority would net about $172,000 from the connection fees. That's under today's deal with 42 lots. If we get the rezoning and you approve this revision, we will still be locked into the $660,000 reimbursement, but your proceeds will go up dramatically. The authority's proceeds will be about $1,300,000. So we think this is a win for both of us. It's one of those rare occasions where we don't really see a downside to anyone. We've met with staff quite a number of times, and I think we've worked out all their questions, but we're here for your questions.
Are there any questions by?
Chairman, I have some questions. Hi, thank you for coming and sharing this with us. So the initial infrastructure deal that you were putting in, was it just to cover the 42 lots, or was it going to be able to be used for other areas?
Yeah, the entire justification for the reimbursement was that we upsized the water lines and the sewer mains to serve other properties besides ours. So there's capacity for at least 50 additional houses. It was basically designed to serve the Rose Payne property and the properties adjacent to that we have no interest in, but that was the justification for the reimbursement. So We upsize the sewer main that will serve, and it goes to her property line. We upsize the water main, and that is why. We were building more than just enough to serve us. And that original agreement went into much detail on how the proportions were calculated, and that's where the 660,000 came in. That was the county's share of the upgrade cost. Another major upgrade that we built that we didn't need, there's a water booster pump station, and that increases the pump pressures in that area. That's an area where the Owen system, the Dahlgren system, and I always get the third one wrong, the St. Paul's system all join, and we're upgrading those connections. But as part of that, there was not going to be enough water pressure. It would have served us, but would not have served other people as well. So we agreed to put in a water pump station, which we have done. That's in place. That's been there for 3 years now, and just that in itself went way over budget that we're paying for, and that almost cost $600,000 by itself. So staff was very comfortable that the 660,000 was a bargain to the county at today's prices, but that was our original deal, and we feel like we need to honor that.
So let me ask you this a different way, because I'm not sure if you answered the question. So although that information was really helpful, so thank you. So the initial deal that you made, it was going to serve the 42 lots that you had plus an additional 50. But now that you're doing 100, are you going to have to upgrade that initial infrastructure, and is it going to support any additional?
Oh, awesome question. No, those sizes will still work for the 50. We don't need to upgrade them, but if there's a slim chance that we will, I think we're obligated to upgrade what we've already put in the ground to serve the 50. So that is, I mean, we'll have our engineers at site plan, we'll design it, but I think we're obligated under the agreement to provide service to 50. So we can't use up all that capacity. I did not get your question the first time. That was great. Okay.
So you'll be able to do the infrastructure for your 100 plus 50?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Mhm.
Do we have any other questions?
I do. This question. So I know I've heard about Walnut Hill the whole time I've been on the board, and this is my 6th year. So then what I'm hearing is you resolved a lot of those issues that have been going on, including the soil, as you mentioned, in the pump station.
Yeah, our hope is, and to be honest, we've got to give Ms. Hall credit for coming up with the idea. The subdivision was a long road, and part of the road, about a third of it, went down into, they weren't technically wetlands, but they were wet soils. They were tough, bad soils, and we couldn't get a stormwater pond to function properly. And she came up with the idea, if we increase the density, we would still kind of come out cash the same, but we could build it on a smaller part of the land, leave that stuff wild, and we would have room to put the stormwater pond uphill a little bit where it's drier land. So that's what's taken us so long, is to come up with a plan that would work, that we could actually build. Because I didn't want to come back to the county with another failed plan. I wanted to make sure it's going to work.
All right. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Anything, Mr. Miller? Yeah. So do we need to bring this up to a vote then later?
Yeah, that was the intent, is to let the developers make their proposal, and then obviously Ms. Lackey's gonna have to review the agreement and any kind of massaging that needs to be made. But we had hoped that this would kind of be a 2-step process and bring this back to another meeting for your approval, or whatever your consideration will be at that time. And I just point out that this is the process that, as Mr. Gerald indicated, they're in a rezoning request that they're going to put through the community development. So community development asked the service authority for their input, and then of course this was a development agreement that the service authority had with the property developers, and so that's why you're getting it. So it would definitely is something that I'm sure that the planning commission members will want to know, what's the status of this, because they obviously have to provide water and sewer services.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
The rezoning, is it just for higher density or what is it for?
Yes, it's for higher density to go to townhomes, but it was always part of of the plan. I mean, was to come back and continue the development of this parcel. I'm not sure of all the history of it because it precedes me, but I do.
Yeah, yeah, the zoning itself, right now, by right, we have 42 single-family residents, and the rezoning is to make it condense the geography, we're going with townhouses, and that was the idea of by condensing and having the townhouses, it frees up the dry land for the stormwater pond. So it's a rezoning so that we're to a category where we're allowed to have the townhouses as an option, and it gets us to that density of 100 units altogether. 25 singles and 75 towns.
Thanks.
Mhm. Well, if there's nothing else, we appreciate the time and the presentation. We'll look for Ms. Lackey to take a look at the contract and get back to us so we can take a vote on it.
Great. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Mr. Parker? Just something popped in my head for a second. On these homes and townhomes that you're gonna be building, what kind of price range are you looking for the single family and then also for the townhomes?
We're really early in the stages for me to tell you that one. The single families there's a model that's there now. That builder will be building the singles and they'll be very similar to that. And I'll be honest, off the top of my head, they built that in 2017, I think. I'm not sure what that would go for today. So we will have that info for the Planning Commission. I'll have some ideas of what the prices would be. I wouldn't want to throw a number out today. I would be wrong.
Oh, I know you got a number because you're not gonna move forward unless.
I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I'm not building the houses. That's the problem. I'm going to have to talk to a couple of builders of what they think based on what I want for the lots, what they think the houses will be. So I honest to goodness don't have a number. I'm afraid to give you a number because I'm going to be wrong.
Well, okay.
I'll be happy to go
From what I've learned from my relatives
Mhm.
who are in the construction industry, a price of a home generally boils down to 1/3 material, 1/3 labor,
Mhm.
and 1/3 profit. Correct?
That's a very good guideline. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So you've got to have a rough number of what you were looking at to figure out what your third profit's going to be on this. So you know what you can afford and not afford in calculating these numbers. So you're asking us to cover a $600-something thousand and this and that, but you're going to increase the number of units, which is going to increase the profit on each one of yours. I need numbers to know, what we're working with. You're asking me to go from allowing 42 homes to 100 homes. That's gonna significantly increase your profit.
Fair. I will
But
absolutely.
why should we, who are already burdened, take on allowing 100 homes in this area where it's going to increase your profit margin, but it's not going to benefit my customers?
So my answer to that would be your last conclusion is incorrect. I think I will benefit your customers. Under the current agreement, if we built it as it is, the authority would only get about $170,000 of the connection fees. Under my new proposal, after you pay me the $660,000, the authority will get $1,300,000. So you're getting over $1,130,000 more than you would today. I think that's a benefit to your customers. And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. I honestly don't want to. I can get you before next meeting numbers. I'm happy to. I don't want to give you numbers tonight because I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to mislead you.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of clarify what he's saying. So what they're doing is they're developing the lot. He has no idea what you can guess. I mean, if he told me the number of the lot,
only a
I could guess, but he's right. It'd be a guess. So whatever the lot, they're going to sell the lots at a certain amount, and they don't build the houses. They're going to sell them to Ryan or who. Ryan's probably the first builder, I think, on the
Correct.
on the regular houses. I don't know who's doing the towns, but that's the builder will then figure out what, based on the price of the lot, they'll figure out what kind of what level of townhouse or whatnot they want to put on the property to recoup their money, because the lot fee is gonna be probably a third of the house price, generally speaking, or sometimes more.
Right. But I guess the
I-
point
I-
I would like you to know is the authority gets a lot more out of this deal than the original deal. Yes, I will make more money, absolutely. I don't want to say anything wrong. So this is a very slim deal for us, period. Let me put it that way.
Okay, yeah,
Um,
no, I
I honestly, it could be possible the authority's making more money off of this than I am after I'm done messing with it. But I do want you to feel comfortable. The authority is coming off much better after this. I honestly feel that way than it is today. So I'm not getting all of the benefits of this. The authority is too. I feel like we're sharing pretty well.
okay. I understand that, but I represent the Dahlgren district, and
Sure.
St. Paul's is maxed. Owens has had trouble.
Mhm.
We have Dahlgren. You know, everyone's going to want to know
Well,
from me.
and to what I can
Let
add.
me
oh, I'm so- I'm
let me
so sorry.
finish. Okay. We're saying 100 homes, but nobody's told me what kind of homes. You got to admit the water demand and the sewer demand on a 3-bedroom, 1-bath townhome is much different than a mega mansion with 6 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
my constituents are going to want to know what's going in there. How much demand is this going to put on? So
Uh,
whoever you're dealing with has a plan in their head what they want to put on those lots.
Mhm.
So just saying we're going to let lots, you know, that were developed as planned. How can I make a decision as to how much extra demand is this going to put on the system? So, you know, like I said, your developers got to know whether they're talking $200,000 2-bedroom, 1-bath townhomes, or are they talking the Northern Virginia 4-level, you know, 6-bedroom, 4-bathroom townhome, you know? So I think we need a lot more information here.
Well, before we got here, we met with your staff multiple times. We met with Bryce and Dean, and we went through the numbers. I don't want to dare try to quote what the capacities and the gallons per day were that Bryce held us to, because I don't want to go from memory. But we sat down with Bryce. We went through calculations. He was satisfied with the per unit water usage and sewer generation, and they felt comfortable that there is capacity in the system. To be honest, I don't think we would have gotten this far if staff wasn't satisfied that there's capacity in the system. I can certainly get you whatever information you want, but I do want you to know that your staff has already looked at this, reviewed it, and has given the okay. So there's that part. The other part you had mentioned earlier about the problems with the systems, what the work we're doing is, it's certainly not fixing everything, but it's helping to make it a more resilient system. We're connecting Owens and Dahlgren together through our project. Another part of the project is out on 206. Right now, St. Paul's and I believe it's Dahlgren are connected by a 2-inch main for about 770 feet. We're upgrading that. So when we're done, the system should be much more resilient than it is today. Like I said, we're putting in a water pressure pump system that should help everybody. It's not needed for us. It was needed for everything else, which that was part of our deal. That's great. It helps the system. So I think you'll have a much more resilient system. And I think your staff has already determined that you have capacity for it. But I'm happy to give you any information that you need. I just don't want to do it off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll provide that information. We'll have Mr. Young here at the next meeting when they are here, or we can even get that in advance. But yes, Mr. Gerald is correct. Our crews have been working with them and we have been talking with them for several months. So this isn't just something out of the blue sky. This has been something that we've been working with them on. And, I've ever since I started here, and I think Ms. Bender is correct, this has been a project that's been something that I think the community wants and needs more development. And I believe that the Service Authority back in 2016 under different leadership on the board and different management had signed off on this, or at least had started down that road. But then as Mr. Gerald indicated, there were issues that happened with the development that kind of put it into a limbo status. And so now we're back but we'll provide that information to show you, the capacity issues of any and what we talked with them about.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something? Mr. Gerald, I just want to thank you for investing in our county and bringing these customers to the Service Authority and the extra tax dollars, hopefully, to our county that we need really bad.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks for accommodating us.
Sure. I also want to make, because I've been around for 6 years and it has seen your project for 6 years, this is a lot different than when we were first presented it, and it had some issues going way back 2018, 2019, 2020. And affordable housing is the word that's bandied around a lot. So this would give some, I'm going to correct, the townhouses to some of our folks that can't buy a big house but might be able to afford a townhouse, like our teachers in fire and EMS and sheriff's office.
Well, we appreciate you coming in, and we look forward to getting the information and the review contract from Ms. Lackey so we can take a look at it.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Moving on to action items, seeing there's none, go to discussion items, restructuring committee update. So I'll handle that. We've had a few meetings, and I know Mr. Miller and Mr. Messler have been discussing various things, taking a look at how we can restructure certain items. And I know I've talked to them about a desire to try to maybe get it to the utility phase. What we been talking some of the supervisors and whatnot. There's going to be a lot of discussion with that. One of the things though that we do have to, I think, vote on or figure out now as opposed to later, and Mr. Messler can correct me if I'm wrong, we do need to get the whether the person becomes a utilities director or they stay at the position kind of in the matrix we had before. And I think they'll still be a director of utilities because that kind of fits in the matrices of the county one way or the other. That position we need to get somebody in there. They'll have the same qualifications either way, but we need to get somebody in there to start overseeing the operation. So we've got to consider sooner rather than later posting for that position. You might have I think you have so that position under the county administrator kind of as the in-between is a position we need to consider advertising sooner rather than later. This position, they'd be director of utilities is probably what they'd be called. And whether or not they eventually that person moves into the director of utilities under the county, or they just stay the director of utilities now, we've got to get that position needs to be filled sooner rather than later, just for the management, to keep management going for what we currently have and what we future trying to get.
So, Mr. Chairman, I can I?
Yeah.
Okay. So this position is actually a proposed position. It doesn't have to be filled. This is the proposal of the restructuring committee, which I am 100% against, which probably all of my constituents and maybe even yours in Hop Yard are as well, considering that we are hiring somebody to watch over a company that is very highly capable of doing the work that we're paying them to do. I don't see why we are having a restructuring committee that's basically putting an interim general manager in place If we were to have a service authority and have a general manager, then why would we be paying over $2 million for a company to run our business? If we have a general manager, we would run our own business, right? I don't understand the thought process of the restructuring committee, and I'd love to really understand it more.
So it's kind of really simple. So Imboden is only doing the operations. They are running the plants. They aren't buying chemicals. They aren't maintaining things. They aren't planning for the future. They are simply operating. They're making sure that we are operating our plants, water and sewer, within DEQ regulations, and that's what their focus is, to make sure the plants and water is up and running and operating correctly. They aren't planning for our future development needs. They're not looking at any of the proposed capital projects that we have. They're not running that operation. Nobody's doing that right now. Bryce is kind of spearheading it, even though it's not really his job classification. He is spearheading it. But there's all those improvements to the Dahlgren plant, to the interconnections of the water systems that we have on all our basically all the money that was been proposed, the $16 million in funds for the wastewater upgrades, and then the $5 million for the water upgrades. All those capital projects need to be managed by somebody, and then all the repairs and things like that right now have to be managed by somebody, to make sure that those are getting done and whatnot, and that there's nothing falling through the cracks. Now, right now we have Bryce is kind of, if I'm wrong, Bryce I think's kind of been thrown in the breach, so to speak, and he's almost acting like that person right now, even though that's not technically his job description, so to speak.
Mr. Chairman, who has done it for the last 2 years?
If I could maybe provide a framework. So you had a position, superintendent of operations, and I reassigned Mr. Hoagland. He's now working under engineering as the construction inspector. And I think that what you're looking at is Ms. Cleveland. I think you're thinking that this position is just another interim position. I think that the way this committee looked at this was that that the service authority is essentially, either it will continue as a service authority in the sense that it will be independent of the county, and you have the option of doing whatever you want to do at the leadership level, but this position was essentially meant to be filling that superintendent of operations. The committee decided to call it the director of operations. It is the equivalent of a department head at the county level. It's the equivalent of, say, Mr. Muncie, who is our general property managers, or Mr. Messler, who is a department head as the HR director. That was what this position was. It gives you the flexibility as an organization that if you want to approach the county about the idea of creating a public utility and no longer being a service authority, you have that option. Or you could continue as a service authority, but you have this position that's overseeing the contract, because I think what Mr. Parker's indicating is correct. You have contract administration that still needs to happen. Essentially, it's being handled by me, and it's being handled by Mr. Eisenbeis, and it's being handled by Ms. Norris Barker, and that's fine. We can continue to do that, but I think that what the need is from the oversight of maintenance and the making those critical decisions, dealing with strategically how you pursue certain infrastructure improvements to the water and wastewater. Certainly Imboden is involved in the process, but they're involved in it from an operational standpoint. They're not involved in it from the overall capacity of the entire organization. That's what this was about. It was not, I don't think it was, I still advocate, and it's my position to advocate that the service authority and the county need to be merged. But I realized that was like a very difficult process for people to go through. And so I think that the feeling was on the committee, maybe we look at this incrementally. And you still could maybe get to that, or you can make the decision. Ultimately, the Board of Supervisors has to weigh in. But in the meantime, what the committee was trying to do was, let's get somebody, as you guys call it, the boots on the ground, that can be overseeing what's going on and report to me as the county administrator. Or if you want to hire a general manager, that's fine. But I think that everybody on the committee was like, that possibly is not needed now, because as you said, with all, accurately, as you said, you now have a professional operator in there. So you don't need somebody that's got a class 1 license to be your general manager. That was, y'all were living in a good world when you had Mr. Weekly, because he was a class 1 water and a class 1 wastewater status. And he was also your general manager, but you didn't have that in the years past. You had engineers, which is fine, but you don't necessarily need to do that. And so that's why we looked at doing it.
So I would say that the last 2 years that I've been on the board, this service authority has spiraled downhill significantly. We started with a general manager. We went to an interim general manager, which was then the interim general manager for 2 years, which I vocally continue to say that the organization needed a leader, which we never got, which ended us having to do a $2+ million contract with Emboden so that they could run our organization. Now you're proposing that we add an additional employee that our service authority would pay for to manage the people that are managing our business. To me, I am here to represent the people that are paying this bill. And I know for sure that there's more efficiencies that can be done. And the reason for this restructuring committee, and you can go back and look at the budget sessions that we've had and the working sessions that we had, were to lower the cost, not add to the cost. So if we are still having an interim general manager, that's not a restructure. That is a temporary Band-Aid, which is not acceptable. We've had a temporary Band-Aid for 2 years. I am here to tell you that I am not going to be in favor of something like this, as I have seen the last 2 years our service authority go downhill, as our customers has seen that. And it's not okay.
If I may respond, I'm sorry, Ms. Bender, I know you would like to, but I was asked to be your interim general manager. The board makes the decision. At no time have I been asked not to be the interim general manager. If that was a decision this board wanted to make, they certainly had the opportunity to end that at any time. I also believe that you are getting the price of a someone serving in the role of general manager, and you at a very discounted rate, because I am not paid anything near what I'm paid as the county administrator to do this role. The other thing that I think is highly important to note is, at the time that I took this position over, you had a position of the general manager and you had the position of superintendent of operation. That position is vacant as superintendent of operation. So this is not adding another position to this organization. This is taking advantage of a vacancy that we have and basically propping it up and giving it the kind of level of supervision and authority that was lacking, to be very honest, with the previous position of superintendent of operations. So I understand and I respect your opinion, but I think that I respect your opinion, but I would respectfully also disagree that the service authority has gone downhill. The service authority has turned the corner by doing what you did by hiring the Emboden people. Your operations are going to dramatically improve. The quality of service is going to dramatically improve. And I think that the activity that Ms. Lackey and myself and this board have done to address things like consent orders and addressing the infrastructure planning needs that this organization had have been very aggressive and have been very much spot on to give you a good future, I believe. But that's my opinion. And again, I'll stand by it. And I think my record speaks for itself. But again, I respect your opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'd like to hear from the other board members, because that's who should be having the discussion right now.
That's why I was waiting to talk. Thank you, Mr. Miller, for answering that question about that. This has been for the last 2 years. That's been a placeholder that has been in budget, right? The position. So when I looked at this infra, I'm one of the people who still argues against a public utility. And as Mr. Miller can tell you, Mr. Parker, I was very vocal in our meeting about that because I'm not 100% on board. One thing is when I looked at this restructuring, this org chart, I looked at the county administrator, general manager, that monetary fund would go away. They would just report back to the, so there would be no more stipend to Mr. Miller's position for that. And this is how I thought it. And then with Mr. Metzler, we had a long discussion about what in the industry do you call this position? And that the old name that we gave it really doesn't fly anymore in the current world of HR and jobs. So that's why it has sort of a different title, because we tweaked around with the title because that's what the standard is in today's market. So I'm looking at my notes here. And one of the things in DEQ, as everyone knows, DEQ is paying always attention to us right now. And they wanted to make sure that there was someone that not only could manage the Emboden contract, but also could take care of capital projects and making sure that, everything is done with capital projects and making sure that we're on our CAP, the whole function of that. Also to manage the maintenance that's left and to also manage the customer service that is left. And, there's many terms, and then also be a compliance officer. And it was mentioned that Louisa has one sort of in the same position. They can coordinate repairs and maintenance, be a contract administrator to make sure that we bid correctly in procurement and all of that stuff, help administrate contracts. And one more thing is Mr. Bryce Young is not in, Mr. Miller, you can confirm this for me, is not, water and wastewater is not his area of expertise. So this engineer we could look out for that would have the expertise that is more into the water and wastewater field. Is that correct, Mr. Miller?
Mr. Young has worked in water and wastewater when in previous positions, but he is a principal engineer and yes, I think what we were thinking is that you'd have kind of a duplicate, because right now Mr. Young is just like the whole county engineering services. They're being pulled into into all of the service authority because it's a natural fit. It's just like why you have your HR doing the work for the service authority and why you have your finance department doing the work for the service authorities, because we're trying to save the money for the service authority. So it was just natural to also have engineering do that because they have the expertise rather than having it hired out.
And then one other thing on that, since I've been on the board for a while, when I first came on, the service authority, I found out after I came on the board and we had our first set of DEQ consent orders, we weren't in a swimming position at that time. So I really see the contract with Emboden and what we've been doing. It's going to be really difficult, but it's a step forward. And I've always thought as this restructuring committee and the whole restructuring is we need to hash out and figure out how to move forward and put a framework in place and vote on it so that we're stuck to it. And it forces us to actually make the changes we need to make. And if we need to debate more on the dais or have a work session where there's more of the board of directors, I call 100% for it. But we need to make these hard discussions, these hard questions, and we really need to hash it out because the only way to fix it or even have a chance of fixing it is to totally restructure what's left besides, what's left from the contract with Emboden. And we need to do that. So however we have to do that, we need to do it. I know I just said 2 words in the same sentence, but that's okay. So I'll pass off to Ms. Cleveland, who wanted to say something else.
So, Ms. Bender, I appreciate those comments, and I actually agree. And that's the reason why I'm holding strong, because I've heard the last 2 years that, we don't know what we're going to do with a service authority. Everybody's been in limbo. We haven't had a leader. It's been so confusing for me as a business person to understand the organization and where it's going in the future. And we should be looking down the road 20 years, not tomorrow, right? And so this is what I mean. That's why I'm sticking strong to, I don't like this restructure. We need to figure out a way that it works for the service authority customers and also the county. You mentioned a couple things. Procurement, the county does. Our attorney, our administrator, we're all working together already. Emboden has tons of experience and advice that they can give us. We don't need to hire somebody to give us more advice. We're paying somebody $2 million to give us advice. We have a great maintenance person. We could also consider maybe even giving more duties and paying more money to somebody in the maintenance department to oversee some of these projects. What have we been doing for the last 2 years or 5 years? Who's been overseeing them? We don't need to bring on another person, pay them $150,000 to do something that we've all been doing all along. Furthermore, the state of the economy is not very good right now. So the fact that we're saying to our clients, oh, we're going to hire somebody for $150,000 when a lot of them are losing their jobs right now is not the right way to go.
Ms. Cleveland, I don't know where you're getting the $150,000 figure from, but this position has already been in the budget for 2 years. It's just been vacant. Once again, Mr. Miller, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so has the general manager, and that's been vacant.
Right, so that's why I'm trying to clarify, we're not adding a position, it's just restructuring the name. I'm not saying for or against it, I'm just saying it's not adding, it is restructuring and changing
I
the
could
name.
correct the record that you have had a general manager. I am serving in that role. You're getting it at a very discounted rate, but I'm serving in that role, also serving as a county administrator. And I'm happily doing it because I believe that the service authority is part of the county and should always be a part of the county, and we should never contemplate the idea of selling the service authority. It needs to be a part of the county and continue to be a part of the county for the county's strategic opportunities of growth and serving these people. And so, but anyway, I would agree that perhaps a work session, Mr. Parker, would be in order, because I think that the kind of work that the restructuring committee is doing, very good conversations, very good discussions, and I think that your points, Ms. Cleveland, would be a great addition to that kind of a framework, and we could do it in the form of a work session. Just have the restructuring committee done in a work session. That would be
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea to get a work session together, just so everybody can sit down and kind of talk about the options and um how easy or hard certain things would be to accomplish. So I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I just throw something out here to consider, or to put this in perspective. The sheriff does not run the sheriff's office every day. He is not involved in the day-to-day operations of the sheriff's office. The fire chief is not involved in the day-to-day operation of the fire and rescue department. They have assistants, they have deputies, they have different levels of supervision. So Sheriff Giles has someone who's in charge of operations. He has someone that oversees the 911 center. He has somebody that oversees courts. Chief Moody has somebody who oversees operations, somebody else, the fire marshals, fire prevention, somebody else overseeing the training, EMS, that sort of thing. In this picture, this model, we have to think of the general manager or acting general manager of like the sheriff or the fire chief. And they delegate out the day-to-day operations to other folks. In this case, Mr. Eisenbach for the maintenance, and now we have Bowden, but in Bowden for the wastewater and water. But we still need a operations chief, for lack of a better term, or director of operations, to coordinate and funnel all this stuff up. They don't bring every little problem to Sheriff Giles or Chief Moody. It gets handled at these lower levels. If it's then it goes up to the general manager, and that's why you need this interim position. Loan officers don't go to the bank president with every little problem that comes up, right? There's different levels of management to handle the problem, and if they can't, then it gets kicked up and that sort of thing. Or in manufacturing, if there's a problem with making the widget, the guy on the line doesn't go running to the president of the factory every time. It goes to the different supervisors, and that's why you you need that position. Thank you.
I think that probably the answer to this, because we could debate here all night, is to get a work session together where all the directors can get together and we can kind of discuss the pros, cons, why we're looking at things a certain way, and what's needed and how fast we can get anything done. Because I think that's the only way to kind of get it worked out.
Mr. Chairman, do you think that we could have a joint session with the Board of Supervisors, or maybe we can have an individual session and then a joint session, because I know that they're going to come into play with making the decisions that we probably would want to make.
Yeah, I mean, if we were going the utility route, yes, we'd have to. I would leave that to kind of Mr. Miller. What do you think's better, to have one big joint session, or do an individual one?
Seems that you all need to maybe come up with a unified plan, or at least as much unified as you can get it, and then have that conversation, I think. So I think a work session, as many work sessions as you need, it could be done as part of the budget discussions, if that was something that you wanted to do, of this group only, working through this issue. And then I think bringing the Board of Supervisors in. There's a lot of other things that, and I know Mr. Parker knows about this, that I'm going to talk about here in my general manager's report about groundwater and what the future of this county is all about. That probably would be a good topic for a joint meeting. I think it's a good point.
Yeah, and we've discussed that, because the issue of groundwater is going to hit everybody in the county, and it's going to need a joint meeting with that, and it might be good to bring it. So, yeah, let's take a look at whether it's with the budget or whatnot, that we do the work sessions initially on our own, kind of come up with a framework plan that we want to present to the supervisors. All right, maintenance division report. Mr. Eisbess.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I kind of got an org chart here for you, what's going on now, so it fits right in. So, what we're doing actually now. This is currently basically what we have going on. With the customer service part with Patty and Shelby. Of course, all that's left is maintenance and Bowden. Everything within Bowden is coming through me now currently. We're taking care of all the repairs, ordering parts, anything they need, we're taking care of it. That's also anything that comes in the door. Could be anything from a service call to part of a contract. It's just whoever calls at this point. But that's how we are operating right now, currently, and have been, except for the loss of the water department. In April, we did 336 line locates. That's an average of 16 a day. You can imagine how much time that takes to travel around and mark all those locates. It takes up quite a bit of time. Plus our regular customer service requests, which was 59. We've been working with procurement for some of our capital improvement stuff. We're looking for a new pump truck because ours is currently on its last legs. It's been quite a process. It's been 10 months now, back and forth with bidding on that. And Bowden commented on the nitrate recycle. We're currently designing a new permanent fix for that. We got a welder on board now. We have to get a crane to change some of these parts and make a permanent recycle that's going to help the plant totally along. Of course, we're continuing with maintenance and wastewater, water and facilities, maintenance of the distribution systems. We've had quite a few leaks, quite a few breaks. Contractors it's spring, so they're out digging and working, and there's been a lot of repairs. Last month we did the meter reads, disconnects, reconnects. Saft well is currently down. All the other wells are keeping up with that right now. We're working on a repair for that. We just got a price in for that, and we're going to be making some decisions about that, which I'm sure we'll be bringing to you. It's going to be probably a little costly. Assisting in Bowden with anything they need, identifying facilities, just the infrastructure, just getting them boots on the ground with them, showing where things are, how things work, getting their view on things. Of course, the things that they're identifying haven't been identified in the past. So we've had quite a few repairs that had to be done quickly. And except for a few parts that we're still waiting on, we've pretty much kept up to speed with them. We've currently changed all the locks and padlocks around, keep everything secure so their facilities are secure, just in case anything happens. Capital improvement projects, I've been in with the meetings with the engineers now, giving our input from the Service Authority, working with Bryce to give them updates on what we're looking for, because we're basically the end user of this. And we want to see what we're going to get. AMI metering project has kind of exploded. They don't currently have any place for their people, so they're not waiting till July. They've been in here for the last month and are moving forward. So that would pretty much accelerate our time frame 3 months. We're still waiting on parts for a lot of their stuff, but our guys are out showing them meters. We're digging up meters, making repairs as they're doing stuff. We're currently interviewing tomorrow for 2 maintenance techs. We were planning on trying to get an electrician position in since I've been doing the manager role, but we've got no applicants whatsoever. I'm going to continue to do the electrician role and just keep 2 regular maintenance techs to get some people on the ground so we can start doing some of the things we haven't been able to do. Fire hydrant maintenance, valve locates, exercising. It's really hard when we have a leak and we can't find a valve or it doesn't work. And fire department has been currently doing testing on hydrants, and we have about 100 to fix. So we got quite a lot of work to do. Finance, we've been working with them for budget needs, trying to, some of the repairs and bones asked for, keeping that whole process going because lead times are still out months for parts. The supply chain is not speeding up whatsoever. It's hard to keep in some of these temporary fixes to get things working, with suggestions from Bowden on how to get stuff going and keep their plants working and keep it all going. This month is disconnects and reconnects. So that is 2 weeks out of our time that reconnects and disconnects. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hasenfeld? Thank you for making the presentation and thank you for all your hard work.
Thanks.
General Manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say thank you to John and his crews and obviously Patty and Shelby for, this whole transition has been obviously challenging in a lot of ways. I know that Bowden has done a great job coming in and they knew obviously some of the things they were dealing with on the wastewater side, but I think they were definitely some eyes open on the water side, but they are picking up and just doing everything. And John Eisenbeiss and John Simmons, who's here in the audience, are 2 peas in a pod, I guess. They hang out together a lot, but and we also had Jamie, who is also one of the lead operators for wastewater, but also you're involved in the water too, I guess. So yeah, he's part of the team, one of the big indispensable folks within Bowden. If there's any questions that you might have of any of Bowden's while they're here, I'll certainly defer my report for a quick second if you have a question or 2 you want to ask them while they're here. I know that they come the second meeting of the month, but I think it was great that they came today. But if you have a question, I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to make a comment. So over the last several years that I've been on this board, I have often complained about the chlorine smell in my water and often getting dismissed that it was because it evaporates and you have to put more chlorine in it or whatever the excuse was. But over and over again, I would say it was like I was bathing in chlorine, right? And I will tell you that I have noticed that the smell is not as strong as it was before, and I'm very thankful for that, but also very concerned that over the last 2 years, I, as a board member, had continued to say that we were having issues with that and continued to get dismissed. And I do notice a huge difference and the smell of the water now. So thank you.
Yeah, and if you want, you can jump in there. I think there's some maintenance issues found on the well that needed to be done. I think the pump was having issues. I think in Bowdoin identified that as it was causing surges. I think is what I've heard, and that was causing surges of chlorine to go in. So they've identified that and got that repaired. So we appreciate the oversight and getting those things cleaned up. I know Miss Cleveland and her whole neighborhood appreciates the lower chlorine levels. Back to Mr. Miller.
Yeah, and I would just on continuing that, they are available if you wanted to do a little tour. Obviously we would want it to be done in 2x2s or something like that, because I don't think you want to violate any open meetings or anything like that. But if you're interested, we could do tours, and we could also do the sit downs. I know that Miss Fish had sent an email, and I know schedules are the difficult thing. So just let us know. They're always available, and you give me enough lead time, we can get a hold of John or Jamie, and they'll be happy to run you through a wastewater plant where they may be, or the water wells that they're dealing with. Okay, to-do list, the non-capital items. So most everything that is usually capital, but there's a couple more things that are related to financing. Obviously, the AMI project, AMI project that Mr. Eisenbeis talked about, that is on course. It's obviously been accelerated. So perhaps we'll get this, it's a 3-year project, and so perhaps we'll get some of this all implemented a little sooner. But this is obviously a project that's going to benefit the customers. I've talked about it before, and Ms. Norris Barker has talked about it in terms of the ability for customers to actually go in and see more information about their water usage, and if identifying leaks or identifying other issues associated with their service. So should be a very good thing there. You do have a list of the items in front of you. Just to point out the development review projects. So the Walnut Hills proposal is an example of where the Service Authority is participating in that development review process with the Community Development Department. And so we sit down and we get Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, the Pyramid Health folks who have proposed to build. We're involved in all that kind of stuff. Bryce Young is brought in because there really isn't an engineering person on the Service Authority side. And so he serves in that role. And so we look at all of those things and then provide that information to the Community Development Department. Fire hydrant maintenance and replacement, like Mr. Eisenbeis referred, we're working with fire and rescue in terms of making sure we identify what hydrants are out of service and what hydrants need to be upgraded. And they have a color-coded process that they do. And then also just maintaining those in terms of getting cleanup around them and finding them, because a lot of times they get, covered with weeds or covered with brush, and so you have to end up cleaning them up. Transition to surface water, obviously that is the number one goal that the Service Authority should have. We're hearing obviously a lot of folks from the DEQ standpoint and also Virginia Department of Health standpoint that want to see King George County get off of the groundwater. That is the plan. So we're working on several options. We've had some discussions with Stafford County in terms of a service line from them to us. They're all surface water, and they would be something that would service the western part of the county here in King George. So we're working on that. Preliminary discussions, obviously, once it advances to a much more serious, expenditure of money or entering into some agreement, it'll come to the board. Rate plan implementation, obviously, we've talked about this. You're going into your 4th year for the rate plan implementation. And I know that that's part of the budget process. And of course, we'll have public hearings on the budget and whatever rate structure that you come up with. Low-income housing water assistance program, that is something that's in place already. Ms. Norris Barker's administering that. That is anybody that has issues with paying their bill or feels they may have issues with it, they should contact our offices and we can sign them up and help them out. This is a good program. The Department of Social Services had forwarded us this information so that we could be of help to people that were in need. Next item, let's see, what do we got here? The next item is just the budget schedule, and I know that, to be very honest with you right now, finance department, they are trying to basically work with the county side. So I think give us another week or so. I think we'll know maybe some things here in the next week or so about when we can start sitting down with you all to do a work session. Ms. Hahn is obviously very involved on the county side and working with the schools. And as you may know, if you're following any of the statewide stuff, there's we're waiting on a state budget for the education systems, and they're saying that could go as late as the end of June because of the primaries, and so that's affecting how the county's budget comes together. But the county's working; the county supervisors are working on it, and then we'll start working with Ms. Hahn and finance in terms of developing a draft budget for you all, and then we'll I guess what I'll do is next meeting I'll have a proposed schedule for you, if that's okay.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, ma'am.
So we're going to have advisory committees, a budget advisory committee.
Yes.
And I have someone in mind, but want to be able to tell her, a general idea. So after you will let us know, we can tell them and then still have time to appoint them.
Sure. If you want to appoint them tonight, you can appoint them tonight, and then we just track it, and then we let them know when the meetings get set up. If that's fine. I mean, it's up to you.
I'd like to have a general idea just because I don't know if it's going to work out
Okay.
for her. Yeah.
Yes, I'll let you know as soon as we get something. And the last thing I would just point out is the groundwater meeting that myself and Mr. Young, Bryce Young, went to today with DEQ. DEQ has a regular meeting of the various districts or whatever you want to call it. We're obviously in the Potomac area, the Eastern Virginia groundwater management area, and there were a number of folks that were there. We're in obviously one of the more critical areas, the Potomac, and so DEQ is getting very active, I guess is what I would say, because the future is, groundwater withdrawals are going to be very limited and very curtailed and very constrained, if you will, going forward. So King George County has got to figure out that plan to get on to groundwater. It's the most important thing we can do as a county. So
Yeah, no, I'll just reiterate what Mr. Miller said. I know some people listening here probably think it's a service authority issue. Having sat in and talked to DEQ, they're not talking just about the wells that the county owns. They're talking about the wells the farmers use and and private wells. They're trying to get everybody off the aquifer. So it's going to be a countywide issue that the county, this county, not just this county, pretty much every county east of 95 is going to have to figure out and solve at some point in probably the next 10 years at the way DEQ is talking.
Mr. Chair, also with that, especially the private well part, because we talked about this at VACO, is that then you butt up against property rights, then the right to have, your well, as opposed to being forced to pay for something. So that also is going to become an issue too.
Yeah, so the DEQ is just definitely getting very active in what they do, and how they wear how it all falls is it definitely groundwater is going to be the future of pretty much everybody east of 95. And while we don't look like we're in great shape on that, we're in better shape because we at least have the Rappahannock, whereas there's other counties that have salt water, and that's what they're going to have to figure out how to use. So with that, we'll move on.
I move that the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors convene in closed meeting to discuss wastewater facility regulatory enforcement status and consent order negotiations pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7 and 8 for consultation with staff and legal counsel regarding actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body and specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice of counsel. I invite the county administrator, county attorney, and assistant county attorney because they are deemed necessary and/or their presence will reasonably aid the board in its consideration of the topics to be discussed pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712F.
Second.
I have a motion made and second. Is there any discussion? Roll call vote, Ms. Binder,
Aye.
Ms. Cleveland,
Aye.
Mr. Morse.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are in closed session.
I move that the King George County Service Authority Board of Directors return to public meeting and certify by vote that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting.
So certify, or second first. So certify,
Is there any discussion? Ms. Bender,
so certify.
Ms. Cleveland,
So certify.
Mr. Morris,
James Moore, so certified.
Alan Parker, so certified. We are back in open session.
I move that we adjourn to May 16th, 2023 at 5:30 in the boardroom.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned to May 16th, 2023 at 5:30 PM here in the boardroom.